Hello, everybody. Good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to The Art as Well. There are a few artists that remind you of an event so many years ago that is sort of indelible in your mind. And certainly my guest this morning, can claim that because Dorothy created a most iconic work about 25 years ago. And it's stood in my memory ever since, and loads of other people. And in fact, I've had emails from people saying, "Oh yeah, I remember that too." And it's just an unusual thing and a great tribute to an artist that they make such an impression. So without further ado, let's go straight over to Connemara and say hello to my guest this morning, who is Dorothy Cross. Good morning, Dorothy. How are you?
Morning, Alan. I'm well, thank you.
Very good. And listen, you're very good to join us because I know you've had a bout of COVID lately,
Yes.
and
So I might start coughing, but
you might, but we'll forgive
yes.
you for that.
Yeah.
So tell me, why Connemara? Because you were born in Cork,
I
and
was
then I
born in
think you moved to
Cork.
Dublin, did you?
I did 1 year in the Crawford. Then I went to three-dimensional design in Leicester Polytechnic and did jewelry design for 3 years. Then I went to California and did an MFA in the Art Institute. I just wanted to get out. And
Okay.
I came back after nearly 10 years and lived in Dublin for 15 years.
Okay.
Always been thrown out of studios and moving around. And then I came to qualify in scuba diving here in Scuba
Yes.
Dive West and fell in love with the place and found a piece of land. That's how I ended up here. And that was in 1997.
So it was really your love of scuba diving really that brought you over to the West, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me, why were you kicked out of so many studios and the
Because
country?
because of the horrendous rental schemes in Dublin. You
Okay.
know, you were only you. I think is it a 4 years, 3 months or something, and then they're allowed to put up the rents. So there's no rent control. So as an artist in those days, you just didn't have money, and then boom, 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 you got thrown out. It's not that
Okay.
I was having raving parties or anything.
Oh, I thought it might have been that by the sounds of it. And and your experience in San Francisco, how long were you there?
I was there for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I loved it. There was a fantastic visiting artist program. John Cage, David Hockney, all these people just moving through, and also was so close to extraordinary landscapes like Arizona and Utah and all that. So
Hmm.
it was fabulous. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the sort of art that you did you start in a particular point and then move on to what you do now? Or was that always in your mind that you were going to use these different media?
Well, I actually did an MFA in printmaking.
Did you?
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, which kind of was by accident, not really by desire. But all the disciplines in the Art Institute were very intermingled. There wasn't much separation. So there was a seminar situation where you met people from all different territories. But what I found about printmaking was it was quite disciplined, and it gave you time. And I'm a very impatient person, so it was a good way to learn how to consider what every mark was on the paper, actually.
Right. Okay. And was photography always something of interest to you?
It became that in San Francisco because it's a brilliant. The Art Institute was famous for photography, and the early days of Californian photographers. A lot of them were
Mhm.
teaching there, and most
Yeah.
of my friends were photographers. So we'd take off to LA or wherever, and I'd be kind of like the non-photographer in the car.
Mm.
But so I think that was a training in a way through their eyes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that stage in Ireland, photography really wasn't considered at all.
No. And I noticed on your social media, you have some absolutely stunning photographs of the area that you're living in, and
Yeah, I
particularly of
use
late with the snow and all that.
yes, beautiful. I use it really. I use Instagram as a balm in a way. I rarely politicize it sometimes, but because you have to these days with the world the way it is. But in general, through COVID, I tried to bring a glimmer of beauty every single day. So it's not
Mm.
about like I'm honored to be an artist. There's very little of that business going on. It's mainly, a spider crab on the beach or my dog
Yeah.
Fergus, who, by the way, I think acting out, just ripped a bag of alginate plaster all over my living room floor.
Oh, great. So there'll be a vet visit after that.
The vacuum cleaner will be out. Yeah, exactly.
Very good. And he's a new addition to your family, isn't he?
He is. Well, I've had him for a year. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
He's a bit bold, but he's gorgeous.
Okay. So why did you move back from, from California? Because you obviously loved it there if you stayed that
Yeah,
long.
I loved it there. I had been away for 10 years at that stage because I was in England for 5. And I always wanted to live in Ireland. I always wanted to live by the sea. Also, weirdly, Ronald Reagan had just become president and we all thought it was nuts. So, can you imagine now compared to this, grotesquerie that's going on in America at the moment? We were shocked back then. And I remember thinking I'll just come back and see how it goes. And I came back in 1983. With very little money, living in a basement flat, but always with faith. There was never any question. I was never going to change what it was I was doing, ever.
So I take it you're a very positive person.
Well, in some ways, not in all ways, but in terms of the track that art brings you along, it's the best life, really.
Yeah.
It's about attempting discovery, even if you never discover.
You're a bit of a risk taker, though, aren't you? And what I mean by that, you if you'll excuse the pun, you push the boat out a bit on certain areas.
Well, yeah, I do these big projects sometimes and I think, why am I doing them? Because they take so long and you confront so many people who are so stuck and institutionalized and, aren't willing ever to say yes. And so when you ask the question, generally it's no or it's not possible. And I am a believer that things are possible. So you're probably referring, the Ghostship was the beginning of that back in 1999. It was meant to happen in a year and it took 4. It was shelved and then mad things happened. They got us to move it next to a coal depot in Dublin Bay and it got covered in coal dust and the maddest things happened. We were told you couldn't go out to refuel the generators for the lights because of insurance. So we were like these guerrilla girls. We just went out and there was a fantastic captain called Colin Newport and we just went out and did it anyway. So in some ways then, we weren't going to drown or anything, but we were breaking the rules to make something happen with these stupid bureaucrats sitting around, in their suits telling us we couldn't do it. That's, I find, infuriating and so regressive. It's so regressive.
Yeah, but you did it. I didn't realize it took that long.
Oh, did you? It was accepted and then there was, I think, a 2-year thing and then Emma took it over and made it happen, actually. And I was helped by a lot of people.
Yes, yeah. And for those who are watching who aren't aware of it, we'll be seeing it later on when we look at some of your work. But it was this old lightship with no engine that would have been moored on a reef. In fact, I think it was off Cork at the time, and that's the photograph of it behind you. And you painted it in a fluorescent paint, so it glowed in the dark, and it was fantastic. It was really eerie and mystical looking. You were also involved in the early days in the Venice Biennale.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, that was really nice. Myself and Willie Doherty, who's a brilliant Northern Irish artist, were Patrick Scott had gone to Venice 30 years earlier, and he was the last Irish artist who had been sent. And we, as you all probably know, we have no pavilion. We're kind of like art refugees. So myself and Willie were chosen to go back in 91 or something, or 92. And I, at that time, a lot of my work, I adore Willie's work. It's very, very different than mine, but we seemed to be on a bit of a trajectory at the time where our work was shown together. And yeah, that was fantastic. And it was actually, we were put in the back of the Giardini Pavilion between Mauritania and I think Albania. And I showed one of my cow's other ladies. I showed my Virgin Shroud who had teats on her head and Amazon who had a big single teat. And Venice is very damp, so they kind of got more swollen with water as the months went past. And myself and Willie would go out at night and paste up his posters of burnt out cars from Northern Ireland, because he became famous for those words floating in the horizon of photographs that advertisers all over the world have taken on. That Willie Doherty was the first person really to do that, to kind of make sense or nonsense or bring in significance through a word in the middle of a landscape. So we were not allowed to do that, but I would be the lookout and Willie would paste up these posters of burnt out cars and I'd be watching to see if any gendarmes were coming. And that was our double act in Venice. It was great. Looking back, it was great.
Fantastic. Was there a lot of controversy maybe about the type of art you were producing? You
No,
know, using the cow's udders.
no, there wasn't. Once or twice I got a few kind of personal attacks about them, and it was very interesting because and for those who don't know the works, it was a series called the Udder series where
Yeah,
I
we'll
had
see some
seen
of it, Dorothy. We will see some of it.
I had seen a sieve made out of a cow's udder in Norway, and I thought it was such a transformative object. But once a woman stopped me on the street and said it was an abomination, and had I not considered women who'd had mastectomies.
Mm.
So I straight away said to her, my mother had a mastectomy. She had no problem with this piece called Amazon, but also it's a cow, it's not a human. So there was this, they were terribly powerful. They were edging on really disgusting and grotesque. But the way I worked them was very, very very tender. I was very conscious I was manipulating the body of an animal,
Mm.
and I treated them with respect, actually. So the finished product or artwork was actually quite it wasn't, you could see that the skin hadn't really been abused. They had arrived in my studio sometimes very abused. Like the single teeth that arrived that I used for Amazon was because the other three teeth had been torn off. You know, so you had those strange accidents that then guided you towards making a piece of work that had this one very strong teeth. But for those of you who don't know the work, it's I shouldn't talk too much about them, maybe.
No, you're okay. But another interesting thing about that I read in your website, and I would urge everyone to have a look at your website because you've quite a comprehensive library, if you like, of all your work over the years. So much so that when I was choosing bits, because you told me to choose bits, which is unusual. I generally ask the artist to do it, but which is typical of you, I guess. But one of the oh sorry, but you see so much work there that we're not going to be possibly able to go near today. But going back to the Amazon thing, is it true that some of the tribes people there actually have a mastectomy so they can fire arrows more accurately?
Oh, no, they were mythological. The Amazonians
Ah,
were, it was a mythological
okay,
uh, story about them cutting off one breast so they could fire their arrows more accurately. So that was one of the reasons of the title. But also
right.
it was about foreign territory in those days, still undiscovered. Now, of course, being burnt as we sit here.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, yes. And Brian McGuire has dealt with some aspects of that.
Mm.
So, Dorothy, I'm intrigued to find out what goes on in your brain because I don't know whether you meditate or how you get your creativity, but I am very interested, genuinely very interested to know how you come up with these wonderful, bizarre concepts at times.
Sure. I don't know. I don't know how I come up with them. They
Yeah.
pop. It's about how you live your life. And then maybe if you kind of direct yourself or take a different route, things present themselves, don't they? It's a bit like, well, in Norway, I found a sieve made out of another.
Sure.
Um, the photograph of the black and white skull with the fetal embryo in the brain space. That was a sudden revelation, really, that the
Mm.
shape of the fetus in the womb is very similar to the shape of the brain in the head. And that was
Yes.
meant to be done for Holles Street Hospital, a maternity hospital, where I was going to put it in the basement because obviously it would upset people to see an X-ray of, you can't X-ray live babies. So it was a sudden, it is kind of this beautiful, going, oh my God, that's right. That's perfect.
Yes. Yes.
So sometimes it works like that and sometimes it doesn't work like that
Mhm.
at all. Sometimes it's much more, right brain, left brain, and you're kind of going, okay, how can I work this out? And at the moment I'm working on something where I rarely work on commission. I can't stand it really. Because you have that worry that you're trying to please somebody.
Mhm.
Usually as an artist, you're only trying to please yourself. And
Yeah.
then if you do, then I think by its nature, by its truth in a way, it would please some other people.
Yeah.
And you don't, in some ways you care, in some ways you don't care, because
Mm.
if you've recognized something in it yourself, that's half the battle, isn't it?
I guess. But does the fact that you're over in the west of Ireland in a very tranquil and beautiful space, does that help you in ways in that you have a certain solitude there that probably allows you drift and wander?
Yeah, but you know, I'm not sure creativity comes from drifting. I live here to remain sane because it's so beautiful, and I have to travel for work, and I go for 3 or 4 days to London or wherever, and then it's enough. I have to come back. So, it is beautiful. I don't know if you can see out the window there, the beach, and the mountain, which you can't see at the moment.
No,
It's
but you're beside the sea there, yeah.
Sunset. So it is beautiful, but no, it's more as a balm. It's a balm. It's nature, and we have to cling on to it as closely as we can now, I think. So
Yeah.
I'm terribly lucky that I ended up here, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Dorothy, we're going to have a look at some of your work because there's so many stories behind them. I think it's going to actually take us a while to get through it. So hopefully we will get through it. I should say that you are represented by the Kerlin Gallery and Firth Street Gallery in London. Just so people are aware if they want to inquire about your work or anything like that. So let's screen share and let me just see. So the first one we're going to show is the one that I sort of introduced at the beginning, which is the Ghostship. Now, can you tell us a little more about how long it remained there and how it was commissioned? Who commissioned it?
It was only there for 3 weeks. It was commissioned it was called the Nissan Project. It was funded by Nissan Cars. One of the reasons it took 4 years to make was that the paint cost 180 euros a litre, and the ship was an old Glaswegian steel ship that had been marking the Daunt Rock off Cork and my father had photographed it in the 30s. And this is it behind my head as well.
Yes.
And the rock was called the Daunt, and it turned out it was the same ship that my father had photographed. So for me, it was very much about memory and respect and risk and beauty, because we used to go out there as kids with my father to bring the men who worked on the boat cigarettes and bananas and newspapers and things in the summer.
Yeah.
And so it was moored in Dunleary, and I would have loved if it had been dragged around Ireland afterwards, and where you would have come across it in the middle of the night unexpectedly.
Yes.
That would have been perfect. But in this particular case, it was a little polluted by city lights and things. More of the trouble of the logistics of something like this. But it worked. It did work. And
Yeah.
it was the most popular piece of work I ever did, and at the time it made me very uncomfortable to make something popular because you suddenly think, my God, is it worthless if it's popular? There is a question
Yes.
around that.
Yes. Yes.
But people were genuinely, men, women, and children were really fascinated by it. I got drawings from kids of it, and some nights it worked better than other nights. The whole superstructure was painted with the really rich phosphorescent paint, and we had to build a superstructure of lights to light it because we didn't have enough sunlight in the winter.
Yes.
So it's complicated.
Oh, right.
It was complicated and simple.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
It needs very little explanation.
Sure, but it looks as if it's been lit up, but that's actually fluorescent paint, and it's
Phosphorescent,
remarkable.
not fluorescent, phosphorescent.
Phosphorescent. Oh, I beg your pardon.
So
Yeah.
it's got the chemical phosphorus in it. So when
Right.
if you put your hand over it, it's actually quite beautiful. You get the leftover shadow of this glow. It's like it's
Oh,
alive.
really? Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I just put the video up. I speeded it up a wee bit just to show each side of it. And then we move on to the next image.
This is a photograph of just a woman floating in the middle of the wormhole. The cursor's right on my head.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Isn't that fun? Oh, it's my cursor. That's hilarious.
Oh, it's yours, yes.
My cursor. For those of you who don't know it, you should go. It's one of the wonders of the world. It's called the Wormhole. It's a natural pool, approximately 30 meters long, 10 meters wide, below Dún Aengus on the terraces of limestone cliff on the Aran Islands. Again, this is very simple, but in some ways, I put the figure in there to bring in scale.
Yes.
Because when you see photographs of it, otherwise you don't know how big it is. And in some ways, I think and the ocean is out to the left and comes in subterraneously and surges up and down. So you can only get in when it's quite calm. But I was a swimmer, and for me, it was the closest thing to the most beautiful natural pool you could find in anywhere. But also, it's about, in some ways, it's about a personal ocean, that you're lying kind of in the middle of this swell of ocean, but you're contained by these walls. But different surges come every few minutes in from the bigger ocean that's outside. So in some ways, it's about limitations, personal limitations that are refreshed over and over again by the ocean and by tides.
Fantastic. And that is you. You didn't get a model to do that.
That's me, because my friend didn't really want to get in. And there's a little crack on the left-hand side.
I beg your pardon?
There's a little kind of a stair. There's a crack to the left-hand side that's off screen there that you can kind of climb down. And obviously you wouldn't get in a storm, but you can get in and out through that crack on the left-hand side.
Okay. And it's not man-made.
No, it's natural. Limestone the stratifications are laid one on top of the other, so it's through erosion. And actually, when you dive down in there, you can see the rubble of where it's collapsed. That's what's caused all the the fantastic caves around the Burren and stuff like that. It's the same material.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, this is the one that I put on social media, and it got a lot of attention, but I incorrectly described it as being entitled Skull. But in fact, it is not entitled Skull as such.
Yeah, very unusually, I didn't title it at all. And normally I'm kind of climbing the walls trying to find an incredibly
Well, can I tell you a little story?
Do.
As a result of putting that up on social media, we got a few comments, but we got a comment from Sarah Nightingale of the Sarah Nightingale Gallery in New York, who just put simply brainchild. Which I thought was quite clever. So there.
Yeah. So there's another title.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So as I said, that came from that notion of the positioning, and it's one of my favorite things, actually. I have one on the wall over here, and very often when people see it, they don't even see the fetal, the child, on kind of secondary.
Yeah.
But it's about conception, it's about thought, it's about physicality, it's about inheriting your own mortality. It's about all those things, but very simple, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
It's
very beautiful.
And I love saying everything's very simple, and then people say, no, it's not simple, but it is simple. If you actually bring it down, it's simple. Yeah.
And I mean, it's open to interpretation by, as I said in the post, I'm more interested in what your interpretation is than anyone's, but it does allow you interpret for yourself.
Oh yeah, but hopefully anything any one of us ever makes is open to interpretation by anybody else.
Absolutely,
you can't control that.
Yeah.
I love this one too, actually, because it's all about death, maybe. This, when I came back to live in Ireland in '83, I found a skull. I was a bit of a dumpster rat. In America, people would leave out beds and chairs and everything, and you could kind of furnish your apartments through people's recycling.
Yes.
And so I saw a skip or a dumpster outside my flat, and I climbed in, and there was a marbled box with a complete skull in it, with all the sections. It was an educational tool. And I knew it was a skull box because of my Aunt May O'Donovan, who was a pathologist and who used to have one. So I opened it thinking it'll be empty, and inside was this skull. Anyway, this piece I had never used human bones. I had used with respect, I always try and say the skin of a shark, or, the skin of a cow or a snake, a lot of maligned animals. But I'd never touched the human, really. And this was the cranium of a human's head, who lived in there, we don't know. So I gilded it with 18-karat yellow gold and placed a meteorite in a bowl of the head. And it's a sculpture as well as a photograph. But the idea, again, in some ways simple. The meteorite exists out in the outer universe and falls to Earth. And the spirit or the energy of the human, when he or she dies, possibly accesses something higher than ourselves. So in some ways, it's about a union between, what exists out in the universe and what exists on this planet.
Yes.
So I see it kind of as a reliquary kind of meets Patrick Scott meets some kind of strange Tibetan death ceremony. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah. And we are all stardust, aren't
we
we?
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Now, shark.
Oh, the poor fellow.
Hmm.
He's a poor beagle shark that we got for a project in well, he was being sold for food in O'Connell's fish stall in Cork, and my friend Canna Sharkey, who's a chef, used the flesh, and I took the skin and brought it back here to my studio and pickled it in taxidermy solution. This was a particularly unpleasant. Most of this work I do myself.
Yes.
I was helped with a young brilliant knife maker now, funny enough, called Hugo Byrne, who helped me scrape the skin for days and days and days to get it down to the pelt. And
Yeah.
then I tried to reform it into the shape of a live shark, which was quite difficult in his shrinking and shriveling. But
Hmm.
I lined him with, and he is a he because of the claspers. You can see it's a male.
Yeah.
With, again, 18-karat gold. So, and this one I did call Relic, and he was suspended. He was shown in 2 or 3 different ways, but once was in London in the darkness, and it was very, very beautiful because it was like going on a night dive, and he was lit underneath, and it was like he was suspended in this black well of space. And this was taken in the Kerlin Gallery in another show I did with my friend Willie McKeown.
Fascinating. And this theme reoccurs quite a bit, doesn't it?
It does. The shark recurs quite a bit. I used to, in the early days, the very, 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 very early days in the 80s, I made a show in the Douglas Hyde called Ebb, where I had a shark dancing in a bronze woven dress with little breasts. She's now in the Kew Lane Gallery. And she was kind of a ludicrous, funny little character. And but I used to dream about sharks, and I used to use Jungian psychoanalysis to kind of translate the significance of these dreams. But the shark then just kind of continued. You know, I've dived with them all around the world. They're again, they're one of the most ancient animals on the planet. They're being abused by man now. The Chinese and Japanese the other day again refused to sign a law to stop finning, so they're going to continue finning, which is decimating the population of sharks. They're terribly important in the ecosystem. They lived on the planet 400 million years ago. This piece, which is was made for a show in England about time, I started looking at the age of the shark and the age of Mount Everest. And supposedly Mount Everest rose to its height 60 million years ago, and the shark was on the planet 400 million years ago. So in effect, the shark is much older than Mount Everest. So where the dorsal fin is, I did a CNC machined copy of the peak of Everest and put it on his back.
Yes.
And this particular shark actually came from Dundalk. It was the last blue shark that was kept in a freezer, because now, thankfully, they're not allowed to be sold for food in Ireland. And I picked him up at 7 o'clock in the morning at a roundabout in Dublin. You know, they're the other sides to making these works. And then he was cast in bronze art in Dublin.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're much maligned, and I think on your, am I right in saying on your website you have a video of a woman who saved a number of sharks by taking hooks out of their mouth?
Well,
Or am
that's
I
not me,
dreaming?
but yeah, that's not me, but that's on.
Ah,
She's on Instagram. She's fabulous.
well, maybe that's where I saw it.
Yeah, she's been doing that for years, and the
She's
sharks
a
actually come
collection.
to her.
Yeah, she's a collection of 300
Yeah,
hooks
but
that she's
what's
taken.
extraordinary is that they allow her. They swim up to her and they allow her to remove the hooks.
That's right. That's
You
right.
know.
Okay, now this is called Parachute.
Parachute, a bit like this fellow up behind me here.
Yes, the gannet. Yeah.
He's the gannet is like the albatross of Ireland, very beautiful bird. Many of them, you know, dive out here along the edge of the coast, and I found 1 or 2 perfect, unfortunately dead on the beach. Sometimes I dive into shallow water and break their necks. And in this particular piece, Parachute, it's about in some ways, it's again quite simple, the collision between a human attempt to fly and the bird's ability to fly. So you have this blue parachute I bought in an army surplus store that I think is used for people jumping out of airplanes when it's a blue sky so they won't be seen. And I just attached this perfectly a taxidermied planet as if it's diving down into the water. So it's in some ways it's ludicrous because the parachute, you know, is not going to save the bird. So you have this human attempt meeting the animal attempt, and in some ways the animal wins.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful.
But it's sad. That piece is sad.
Now, a number of body parts start to appear at some point, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. And tell me about this one. Are these
Well,
your fingers?
and I think those ones are mine. Yeah, they're just kind of simple, aren't they? They you know again it's about some kind of discovery and some relationship with a mollusk.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't need to be.
Sure.
You know, you
Yeah.
don't really have to talk about that at all, Alan, do you?
No,
It's
well,
tender,
if not, not if
tender
you
little
don't
thing.
wish.
But they're beautiful. They're beautiful little shells, you know.
It's
And
beautiful.
it's also about, you know, the way a mollusk comes out and then withdraws, you know, and the kind of when it's exposed, it's very vulnerable, and then it
Yes.
goes back into its shell where it's protected. So in some
Indeed.
ways, it's
Yeah.
about a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this one, the family. I love this one actually. It's Daddy Crab, Mummy Crab, and Baby Crab. And I was out in my currican here in Little Kilry, and I found a lobster pot up on the shore, and the 3 crabs were all dried out. It was a very hot summer, which must have been years ago. And so I took them, and a friend of mine, Sarah O'Flaherty, cast beautiful, as they're like Japanese casts of every limb of the crab. But it was like Goldilocks and the Three Bears or whatever. But at the time, I had been working with penises as well. And I had this beautiful cast of a penis. And the thing about a crab is it's exoskeletal. So its skeleton is obvious on the outside of the animal and the softness is on the inside. So in this particular case, Daddy Crab has his penis is on the outside, but it almost appears like some kind of you know, cannon or, you know, weaponry. And it's almost like protecting his family. This is my dialogue around this, you know, you can do whatever you like it. But also I remember, you know, you have this whole kind of confusion in the whole notion of, you know, the phallocentric thing of power and struggle and abuse and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, the penis itself is it's a very vulnerable thing. I always thought that even as a kid, I remember thinking, Jesus, poor little boys are this very vulnerable thing. So on one hand, it's powerful and protective and maybe aggressive, but on the other hand, it's vulnerable. So it was playing with that. It's outside the skeleton. So it's exposed, but also, you know, it's ludicrous, this piece. And the little baby's so kind of shriveled and kind of sweet. I'm very fond of it, I must say.
Wonderful. I love it. Okay, now this is another project that you've I mean done a huge amount of work on, and it relates back to all sorts of other things, you know, about a woman who investigated and bred jellyfish, isn't that right?
That's right, yeah. Maud Delap, wonderful
Yeah.
woman, down Valentia Island with her sisters, and bred jellyfish in bell jars, and got an honorary doctorate, I'm not sure, from the Linnaean Society retrospectively, because she really wrote scientific papers. But I went down, my brother is a scientist, he's a geneticist, and we got invited by SciArt, which was a science art project funded by the Wellcome Trust, to make a film about Maud Delap. So I wanted to get footage of jellyfish, and there are these lakes in Palau and Micronesia, which I had heard about, which are full of jellyfish. So I went down there with a friend of mine, and we filmed in those lakes. And they're actually non-stinging jellyfish, and they migrate across these lakes. It's exquisite. It's like paradise. You put your ears above the water and you hear these tropical birds, and then you're down below in these massive clouds of rhizostoma jellyfish that don't sting. That we filmed for the film.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, we'll move on because I want to get to the last bit, you know, relatively soon, so we can go out and talk to our viewers. This one is called Foxgloves, and I just chose these by way of sort of explaining maybe the methodology that you might have used to cast them.
Yes, these this is the only thing I ever repeat. I probably started them in, I can't remember when I started them, but I was doing a project for Dia in New York about vision actually, and when we were kids, we were told never to put your fingers into a foxglove and lick them because you would go blind, which is semi-true, in that the drug in the foxglove digitalis, which is used as a heart drug, if you imbibe too much of it, it can make you see in primary colors, blues or yellows. So I started thinking about attempting to cast them in bronze. Terribly, terribly difficult, because you have to dip the flower in wax. It's not too hot to melt the petal and not too cold to make it too thick. So that's a good choice, actually, Alan, because you can see then that I cast fingertips and bend them as if they're bells. And I set a set of fingers, or maybe sometimes more than a set, within the stand of foxglove, and then they're cast in sections of 8 or 9 inches. They used to be cast in Dublin Art Foundry. Now they're so fragile. I have to get them done in London because they have to be poured incredibly hot, and then we weld them together. And then I patinate them black, which I think is kind of beautiful. Some people think it's they're not as beautiful, but they're like almost sumi ink drawings. And a lot of people don't even see the fingers unless they really, really look. And every year, or some years I haven't done it, but maybe for 7 or 8 years, I make 2 each year because they're so difficult to make. My studio is like an abattoir when I'm working on them, covered in red wax. Then they have to go to England. You have to pack them in tissue paper. But then when they come together, they're very, very beautiful.
Very beautiful. And I mean, I'm unfortunately, my little centerpiece there doesn't do justice to the actual work.
I have one here actually, but I won't.
All right. Well, actually, we were going to do a little 360, weren't we, at one point?
There's one there in the window.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe when we finish, we might do a quick tour around the studio.
I kept one up years. They're terribly expensive to make, but they're worth it because they're very beautiful, actually.
Very beautiful. Yeah. Now, this goes back to the other series, and it shows the work you were talking about on the right-hand side, which is the statue, isn't that right?
Virgin Shroud.
Virgin Shroud, I beg your pardon. And then Freud's couch on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
So you always inject a little bit of humor into things, I think, don't you, as well?
I thought they were hilarious. Some people think they're hilarious. It depends on your sense of humor. But yes, of course, there was humor in them because, there is, the Freud's couch in particular. It was in those days I read a lot about Freud and Jung and the whole thing of psychoanalysis, and in the Freud's couch piece, it's like this chaise longue, and where your head would rest if you were in analysis, there's a deflated udder. And then on its tummy is an inflated penis cast in Waterford glass, actually, which is another good story. It's 18 inches long and it's pure Waterford crystal. Sadly, this piece, I think, it doesn't exist anymore. But it was about this collision between the overinflated udder and the overinflated penis. They talk about, mother, father till the cows come home in terms of Freudian analysis. And so much time is spent in that stuff. And I think it's fine. But those were the days. Let us say those were the days.
Okay. All right.
Now, but actually, I love seeing these again. It's not. I worked on my website with Mae Van Osten, who's works with me on these projects, and it was fabulous to go back into looking at work. We decided just to do 3 decades because, as you said, there's too much work. And I adored looking at the work through her eyes because she's 30 something and I'm 68. So suddenly, and to see, does something survive through time? Or was it just fashion at the time? And it was fascinating for me to do that, actually.
Yeah, a lot of artists find that the act of having to go through their work over several decades is quite therapeutic in certain ways, but equally very revealing.
Yeah.
Because you tend to forget things and move on. Not that you forget them, but you put them in the back of your mind and move on to the next project. So let's move on to the next project, and that is the Damascus Rose.
Oh, now,
there's several works involving this particular theme. So I'm showing that, and I might go back to it again. That's it inset into what I think was an exhibition in London.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Talk me through that, please.
Yeah, Damascus Rose, I've been working at Carrara in Italy with a wonderful studio with Francesca Nicoli, whose father and grandfather ran this place. And in the first few years, I worked with white marble, which
Yeah.
is famous from Carrara. But then
Mm.
in her yard, I found these blocks, which were kind of mushy pink. And I asked her what it was, and she said it was Damascus Rose. And I couldn't, at the time, Syria was so much in the news. I suppose it was in the news again yesterday, sadly. But so I was so drawn by that and the whole story of the road to Damascus and the whole notion of taking something that's a geological block from a country like Syria and bringing it to Italy. So I started using it in sculptures. And as you can see, especially in the pillow, the ear pillow,
Yeah.
you never know what you're going to find when you cut down into the stone. Now, I make the models. I make the ear, the pillow in plaster. Then these extraordinary carvers, there are 3 or 4 of them that work with Francesca, who are so skilled, and they still carve like they would have in Michelangelo's days, and no robots involved.
Yeah.
But what happened with the pillow is so beautiful is that it looks like there's blood pouring into the ear. It looks like flesh. So it's bringing together that notion of the history of the human that was present over generations and millennia in Syria, and then this compression into geological time, which is something that more and more interests me, the brevity on this planet. And then for Fritz Street Gallery, I made a floor of carved feet walking along that was called the road to Damascus, or Damascus Road, I think, or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. And there's a little piece which you really can't see very well between the pillow and the pillar there, which I think is
that's made from Brazilian sodalite. It's a blue stone, and it's called blue dive. And the feet, it's as if the body is diving into the stone.
Yes. I'm sorry I don't have a close-up of that one. Okay, and that brings us to the last one, and it's your current project, which involves the repatriation of a mummy, a mummified body, to Egypt. So I have 3 images to show here, Dorothy, if you'd like to talk through them.
Yes, now I shouldn't really talk too long about this because we'd be here all day, but the in 1999, courtesy of Sounds from a Safe Harbour, which is a brilliant music festival in Cork, run by Mary Hickson, I borrowed a human heart and put it on a Navy ship and had it coming up Cork Harbour with Lisa Hannigan, the beautiful singer, singing songs about the heart. In particular, her song called Prayer for the Dying. And that same ship had picked up over 18,000 migrants in the Mediterranean. It took me 4 years to borrow a heart. In the end, we managed to rent one from the Pitt Rivers Museum in England, which had been found in Cork in 1863. So roll on a little bit from that. It was beautiful. It was only one afternoon. Again, we ran into incredible difficulties. But for those 700 or 800 people who saw it on the bank of the Lee on a sunny afternoon, it was exquisite. Lisa was like this forgotten refugee wandering around the deck of a battleship, dressed in grey, singing her exquisite songs. So I'm driving back to Connemara. I remember that my aunt May, who was a pathologist, told me the story of a mummy that had come to Cork in the early 1920s, and that my uncle had at one point been accused of hiding it in the anatomy department. So I got onto my wonderful cousin, who's now 91, and got the facts, got onto UCC to find out where the mummy was. The then head of the library, John Fitzgerald, who's still helping us on this project, introduced us to the sarcophagus, which was still in UCC. But the fabulous twist to the story is, I presumed the body was in the National Museum, but then discovered when I went to a friend who's a restoration expert, 5 minutes from my house, that the body had been stored in letterfrac for 12 years. So that just sealed the deal. It's just, we have to return this man. It felt so, at the time, we wanted to put him on a boat and bring him across the Mediterranean, across that place at Now, as we sit, people are drowning. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. But then the Egyptians said he had to fly. We're still working on it. It's 5 years later. We're close. The Egyptian ambassador in Dublin has been fantastic. The Irish ambassador in Egypt has been fantastic. Simon Coveney was fantastic in the beginning. We got so far so quickly. Mary Hickson, Mayvan, John Fitzgerald are working with me, and we're hoping he'll get home before the end of this year, because otherwise we have to get new licenses, and we're almost back to square one. Meanwhile, a book that I've worked on is coming out in February, which is about the notion of migration, displacement, death, time, with writers such as Edmund de Waal, Hisham Matar, Sonali Dariana Yagala, Max Porter, Rosemary Mahoney. Michael D. Higgins has written us a poem. John Fitzgerald and Nadra Mabrouk, an Egyptian poet. Philippe Sands. It's going to be beautiful, and it's designed by Alex Singh, and I'll put it on media in February. We've been working on it a long time, but I think it'll be beautiful because it touches on this notion of loss, and especially at the moment, what's going on in the world. But it's looking at the body of a man who was buried over 2,000 years ago, who I believe symbolically needs to go home to where he came from. And that's him when we first saw him cross the hill there.
Yes.
Kept in a beautiful metal box waiting to be returned to Egypt.
Extraordinary. There's probably good to mention that what you were talking about there, about the naval ship and all that, there is a film, and we can put the link to that, if you like, in our
for Heartship. Yeah, there's a tiny little, we didn't document it. Sadly, we didn't document the final piece for that.
Okay.
But there's a tiny snippet that will show you the sense of it, because it pulsated. We recorded Lisa with a glass harmonica and a waterphone in London, and then that emanated from the ship as it came up the river. So it was like this weird vibrating jukebox. And then she performed live on board as it docked. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And as regards this one, do you want to mention the scarf or
oh yeah, I'd love to mention scarf.
Do.
You're very good, Alan.
I don't have a photo of it.
Okay,
let's say
any of you, I funded the book, which is called Kinship Home, through selling silk scarves, because you get no money from anyone to do these kind of projects anymore. So I did a limited edition of a beautiful scarf. I should show it to you. It's over there, and it's the cartonnage of the mummy, and we're selling them. 30 of them for €1,250 each, and there are 6 of them left to sell. Yes. So if any of you are interested in a very expensive scarf, here's my little dog. Look at him.
Ah, lovely. That's Fergus, is it?
That's Fergus, and he's saying enough.
Oh.
Too much talk, Dorothy. Too much talk. But I'll put them on Instagram again if anyone's interested. They're very beautiful. They're very beautiful.
Well, they're on the your website as well.
Oh, they're on the website. Thank you, Alan. They are.
Yeah, they are.
And I know they're expensive, but they can work as wall hangings or as beautiful, kind of luxurious scarves.
They're very large. Yeah, they're very large.
You can wear them as a sarong as well.
And if you wish, you can get your name in the book.
Yes, you can get your name. You need to buy them quickly, though. The book's going to print next Friday.
Right. Okay. So this is the final slide that I thought I'd show, because some of your people who are involved in this are there. So
yes,
I thought you might like to say who they are.
Yes, that's myself, John Fitzgerald, he's a poet, and he's now no longer head of the library. He's retired. My cousin, Margaret O'Connor, whose mother and father were the people who I first learned about the story. Margaret Lantry, who's the custodian of the artifacts in UCC, and Brian Fitzgerald, Captain Brian Fitzgerald, who was the captain who allowed us bring the heart up the River Lee.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. So when this goes back, is it being joined by some relatives?
Some relatives.
In whatever it's going to be displayed.
Well,
back in Egypt.
He's the old Carrara Museum are going to take him, which is fabulous. I much prefer the old one than the new ones. Are kind of awful airport type things. So he will go back there. He's one thing that's terribly important about our man, who we've grown very fond of, is that he is not high ranking. He doesn't have gold all over him. We know very little about him. He came in a sarcophagus that was not his own. that belong to a man 300 years older than him. So he's very kind of, the poor guy is kind of thrown from, you know, here to there. And
Yes.
the main archaeologist, Mustafa Waziri, who we met 3 years ago or 4 years ago now in Egypt, he was only interested in the story because I told him the story of my aunt and uncle. He knew he wasn't valuable. They're digging up mummies every day in Egypt still.
Yes. Mm.
So it's more about this strange little story that he really loved, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is this unique in Ireland that is the only mummy that
No, I think there are one or two other ones.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, all right. But you're making a statement, obviously, about the whole idea of repatriation, I presume.
Yeah, I speak about it as restitution in a way rather than
Restitution.
repatriation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. Okay.
Mm.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to invite people to ask questions now. There are
Perfect.
several messages here, so what I'll do is I'll unmute people first. Did we say we do a quick 360 of your studio? Could we do that?
You can do that whether you see anything or anything.
Yeah, just nice and slowly. And
nice and slowly.
yeah.
My foxglove. Can you see
there,
it?
yes. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
Can you see outside the window?
Yes.
The beach.
Nice new deck.
New deck, they've rotted. Beautiful clamshell.
Wow.
The life of the artist storage.
Yes.
The black and white photograph that I kept for my own artist proof.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a bit of chaos, really.
Yeah. And you built this yourself?
Oh, no, I didn't know.
Well, I don't mean personally, but you that wasn't there when you came.
No. Very good friends of mine, brilliant architects, McCullough Mulvin, Neil McCullough and Valerie Mulvin designed it. And I've had it now for about 15 years.
Really fantastic. Yeah. I'm going to read out a couple of comments. Maria Gabriella says, good morning, buongiorno. She's from Rome. Buongiorno to you. Mary Sullivan, can you reveal the cost of the project? I'm not sure which project, Mary, you mean.
The ship, actually, Alan, you know the ship in the harbour that you painted green? I was just
yeah.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. I think the overall budget in the beginning was something like 100,000. And because the paint was so expensive, it was going to take up the entire 100,000. So then everything was shelved. And in the end, I don't know. For working for 4 years, I got 10,000. That's all I know.
Whoa.
It's probably my phone bill, you know?
Yeah.
That's terrible. Oh, that's appalling. Thanks for that, Mary.
Doesn't matter.
Catherine says, what medium of the skull with fetus? What is the medium of the skull with fetus? So I presume it's X-ray.
It's a photograph. Yeah, it's a photograph of an X-ray.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was actually the first time I ever worked on a computer originated. It was the early days. When was it? I did it years ago, 90 something. So it was Photoshop in the early days, set the position of the fetus into the skull. And I was interested that you couldn't, you know, that it's genderless, both the fetus and the skull, which is lovely too. You know, you can't tell.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Desmond says, when I drove trains, I would announce that Dorothy's ghost ship is moored offshore, and I would allow passengers time to get off the train and take photos. But would have trouble getting them back on the train. Desmond, that's a lovely story. And actually, Desmond has been on before talking about his adventures on you know, his career as a train driver, about birds, you know, and about a hawk landing on a poor pigeon in the middle of the railway track, and he stopped the train and saved the pigeon.
Oh, brilliant.
Some wonderful stories.
Brilliant.
Thanks for that, Desmond.
Yeah.
Owen McLaughlin says, fantastic. Stephanie McLaughlin, all stunning and brilliant in its simplicity. Bernadette Kiley, so delicate and beautiful. Sheila Walsh, just when I think I can't be more inspired. Thank you, Dorothy. I'm currently processing Pôle na Pêche through little studies. We swarm there as a family this summer, and I'm still feeling the magic.
Good.
Pauline Flynn, thank you for giving us insights into the depth of your thinking around each piece, Dorothy. Very poetic work. Thanks for that. Tanya, so beautiful, Dorothy, and such a challenge to cast. Loved working on all your projects over the year.
She casts the early foxgloves, yeah.
All right, okay. Yvonne Maloney O'Keefe says, I love your very graceful gestures when speaking. Yes, you do have a lovely gesture to explain yourself. Angie Shanahan, incredibly memorable and spine-tingling moment when the Heartship made its slow progress to the quayside in Cork. Dorothy's work is always memorable. Thank you, Angie. Beatrice O'Connell, thanks, Dorothy. Your work is so iconic and has such longevity. Can you talk about your studio process? What does your home studio look like? You've just seen it. Do you sketch in notebooks?
No, I'm totally ill-disciplined, really.
Are you? So you don't do sketchbooks, no?
No, I do collages. I'm doing them at the moment for this, trying to let this person know what something could be.
Yeah.
I do doodles, but no, I'm not a real kind of,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Like some people are very dedicated. Marianne says, how did the mummy come to Ireland, Cork, and why?
Oh God, how many hours do we have? The official version is it came as a gift from an African missionary priest to the then president of UCC, Alfred O'Reilly. That's the official version.
Okay.
In the early, they were legally allowed to be sold from Egypt, I think up until 1921. So there was an archaeologist called Schiaparelli who was selling them all over the world. So a lot of collections originated then in museums in the world.
Yeah. Okay. Nick Figures from Sydney says, I wish I'd been on the banks of the River Lee to witness that amazing event. Can't wait to visit Dorothy's website. Nick is our man in Sydney, and he's a guest interviewer for the Artist Well in Australia.
Oh, brilliant.
So, but he also grew up in Cork. Bernadette Kelly, wonderful, Dorothy. Thank you. Can I see the scarf? Can we see the scarf? Well, do you know what? I'll put a link on the.
I'll wave it at you, Alan.
Oh yeah, sorry, you said you had it there. Yeah. Bridget Connaughton, could Dorothy talk about pergolese staging? Oh yes, in Valencia. I'm not sure we have time, Bridget, but I'll ask her the question. Abigail, we're so fortunate to have such a brilliant artist in our country. Dorothy, sorry, that ran away from me. Dorothy always amazes and intrigues me. The Ghostship is the best ever piece of public art, Abigail. I presume that's
now, this is me being a salesperson. Thank God I have a gallery because I wouldn't last 5 minutes selling anything. But so beautiful linen box with the scarab on it. A limited edition of 30. You get your little card, beautifully wrapped in gold tissue paper. I'll have to rewrap this beautifully again. And I think there are 5 of them left. And see how beautiful they are. It's beautiful Italian silk. And they were printed in the Glasgow School of Art by a guy who did the job for us. Okay, right now I'm just going to turn it around so you get to see how it's very big and beautiful. Can you see it?
Yes, we can now.
So it's Italian silk, and it's printed by the Glasgow School of Art, and it measures about 1 meter by 2 meters. So some people have bought them to frame, and some people have bought them to wear because you can actually wear them. I'm a model now as well as everything else.
You're a model artist.
That's it.
Yeah.
But I think there are 5 left. And if you go to the website, there's a little, I think in the end, there's a little place where you can connect. Because it's really fabulous, because thanks to everybody who's bought them already, they are funding the book. And the book is going to be so beautiful. It's really going to be beautiful.
And that's coming out March, did you say?
Mid-February. It's the tweaks are happening, and it's going to print next Friday. So, and we have named everybody who's bought a scarf in the books of. Some people don't care about that, but if you did buy one, we can name you.
Sure, it's an option. It's an option. While you were looking for that, Bridget Connaughton said, could Dorothy talk about the pergolese staging in Valencia? I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but anyway.
No, pergolese, that was one of my favorite things too. Opera Theatre Company asked me to do would I like to do a performance? No, I actually, in Valencia Island, there's this cave. It's a slate quarry, and it's extraordinary. And I went to visit there, and it just seemed like an amphitheatre for performance, with fabulous acoustics. So then with Opera Theatre Company, we made a performance of Pergolesi Stabat Mater, which is one of the most beautiful, sacred, extraordinary pieces of music. And James Conway, who was then director, and Opera Theatre Company came together with me, and we did it in this cave. with the Baroque chamber orchestra, and it started to rain, and it was so beautiful. I think it's on the website. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure
I think
either.
there's reference of it on the website.
Oh, there's definitely reference. Definitely
Yeah.
reference.
I'm not, because we didn't document it very well, but there might be a little video. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I'll just read out a few more. Colin Kenny says, "Thanks, guys. I'm looking at next year's Foxgloves already, pushing up outside the window as you speak."
Oh my goodness.
Veronica Crosby, really enjoying listening to the talk. Fascinating. Can you tell us again about how you ordered the book about migration?
It will come out. It'll be out in the middle of February. And if you follow me on Instagram, Dorothy_Cross, I think I am. I'll let you know, because we'll have a launch in the Kerlin Gallery. It's been published by Lilliput Press. So we'll have launches in different places, and it will be for sale in certain, I suppose, Hodges Figures and places like that.
Well, we'll put all that info down in the show notes.
Oh, you're very good. And when I have that information, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, just send it on to me. Bernadette Kylie says, "Thank you, it's fabulous." Oh, that's the scarf, I guess. Madeline says, "Can you mention Trove, the exhibition curated by Dorothy from the State Collection? It was just incredible and such a fresh look at what we already own."
Oh my God, yeah, that was a wonderful invitation to look into the collections of the National Museum, the National Gallery, the Natural History Museum, the Crawford, and I was allowed to kind of be like a little rat running around selecting objects. And then we had a show in Emma in that, that separate Georgian building, of the works coming together, and it was really, really beautiful. And sadly, there's no book for it. There's no documentation of it. But that was a fabulous time, actually.
Okay. Now, does anybody, before we wrap up, would anyone like to make a comment or say anything?
I just find it interesting, Dorothy, that there's a scientific background. You're saying that your aunt was a pathologist, and you go into all of this skins, of all of this. So it carries through right through your work. I mean, your whole family interest in the science side of things, which I find fascinating as well.
Yeah. Well, it was a choice. It was a choice to be a scientist or an artist, and I chose artist. And I often say to students, if you're an artist, you can work with anybody. But if you're a scientist, you can't, actually. I'm going to show you my dog. I love him so much. Look at him. Can you see him?
Lift up the camera a bit. Or just looking at a tail. He's out for the count.
He goes into this. He's like a carpet, but he's...
Very good. Mary, thank you for that. Anybody else like to say anything before we wrap?
It was just amazing.
Thanks a million. Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody, on an early Saturday morning.
Dorothy, it's Eamon.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Eamon. How are you?
Hi, Pauline.
Great. Listen, I just wanted to say we got one of your scarves.
You're very good. Thank you.
It's absolutely and utterly superb. So thank you for...
Well, thank you.
Get
your book when it comes out.
It is really beautiful. I'll probably wear it for a while and then frame it. But it's gorgeous.
It's quite operatic to wear.
And I absolutely love the piece behind you, of the ship.
Yeah.
It's
These were the test tapestries. Yeah.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Great.
Well
done. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, Bernadette.
Thank you so much. Hi, Dorothy.
How are you?
So great to hear that. And yeah, thanks. I'm going to get a scarf.
You're great. You put your name immediately before it goes to print.
Okay, before I change my mind. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Go for it. Brilliant. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Bernadette. Listen, thank you all very much. Thank you to my guest, Dorothy Cross, this morning, who's been wonderful and has given of our time. She's a very busy woman. I know this because when I was talking to her on Thursday, it was probably the shortest pre-interview I've ever had in my life. And that's a great compliment to her, because she's open to anything. She let me choose all the images, which again, I tend not to do.
Thank you for doing that, Alan. I get bored with my own stuff. So
no, you don't. Of course you don't. Anyway, you're wonderful, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks,
Very
Dorothy.
good to do what you do, Alan. Well done.
So thanks everyone for watching. And next week we'll be heading to the States to our guest interviewer over there, and I shall reveal all on Wednesday as usual on social media. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, Please give it a like, make any comment you'd like. We'll have all the show notes there as well, referring back to what we discussed during today's show. And also, please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. It's good for my street cred, and it attracts wonderful people like Dorothy to come on The Art as Well. So thanks all again. See you next week.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.